Okay, yeah. So I continued to practice these solo sessions in what nowadays everybody would call BDSM, which for all practical purposes are identical, or highly similar to what is promoted as BDSM today. The difference was I was coming from a spiritual background. I was holding it in a spiritual context. I was interpreting it emotionally in a completely different way because I had the yogic background. I knew about chakras and I could sense the energy levels changing. This was my personal observation, Dave. This I didn't get it from any book, this 7 by 7 matrix.
It seems like the impression that came from the mother archetype is very interesting with you because you received pain and pleasure um, in both. You had this very open and accepting, intimate relationship with the mother, and then you had a very closed off, negative experience. And in the practice that you were doing, it seems like you were compensating for both within yourself. Um, I'm looking at really like the conditions that led you to actually do this practice, um, because people tend to have a stigma against this as a completely sexually focused thing. But for
Yeah.
you, I think there's a different dynamic there because you mentioned that your caretaker, your nanny, she was part of a community that was already in bhakti. And you coded that relationship with her not in a negative way, which most people would associate, but in a positive way.
Absolutely.
So this already gave you some experience of higher states of energy that also have to do with some devotion to spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think that's the context that's missing when people look at sex and look at how sex develops um, from young child to grown up. Because most of us in the current age are introduced either by accident in seeing the performance of a sexual act with our parents or on the internet. And I think that core impression does a lot to people and where they go in their lives. With you, it happened kind of almost esoterically due to you worshiping the mother later in your life as sex energy, Shakti Kundalini energy, and how this plays into BDSM reflects the motherly impression that you got when you were young. Because
Well,
doesn't the mother have a lot to do?
I don't want to go there. I don't want to be too analytical about it. I prefer to be into it and experience it directly, physically and emotionally. So, okay, yeah. And moving on, it did set me up and it did give me a way to resolve that tension, but it was a highly socially radioactive uh, way of resolving the tension, where the people around me were engaged in resolving their core traumas with all kinds of drinking and drugs and illegal activity of various kinds, uh, or working hard, being straight, working yourself to death, basically. I knew there was another way out. I had some intuitive guidance I must have had, because I didn't start getting into yoga actually as a discipline until I was 12 or 13 years old, and I discovered it in the library. So I was going on pure intuition up to that point. And my intuition, see, has always been several steps ahead of my intellect. It has always gotten me into, I don't want to say trouble, but interesting situations that wound up illuminating uh, the causes and methods and results involved with like living with that kind of energy, you know? And I have Mars exalted in Capricorn, which connects me to like enormous energy, right? But what am I going to do with that energy, Dave? You know, sit home and watch TV? I don't think so. I need adventure. I crave it. You know, why do you think I live in, Bunga Bunga jungle here? I love it. Okay, so uh, what can I say? So I continued to do those practices, but I was unable to find a sexual partner or life partner who understood them because my social context was totally white bread Episcopalian liberal. The people who get BDSM, even as a sexual practice, tend to be um, very, I would say, more on the conservative liberal side. In other words, they believe in home and family and male superiority and, whatever, right? Uh, that the woman is their property, huh? Or the slave is their property, and uh, they are, uh, how can I say, privileged to hurt their property if they want for discipline, purposes of discipline and control. Now, this is completely different emotional background from where I was coming from, because I was coming from yoga and meditation and, like you say, worship of the deities, all the deities, uh, and trying to see how I could utilize this thing, which was very powerful. I'm going to get to that in a minute, how the power of the sensation raises the energy levels. The power of this thing, though, was tangible, was palpable. How do I engage this in such a way that it improves my life or can improve other lives? Okay. So this was the problem actually I set out to solve without being able to articulate it, but because I embodied it. My life itself was that problem, and so I had to solve it. Okay, so now we need a little background. According to the table, the 7x7 matrix, which I'm going to put up on the screen here, the 7 chakras, each in control of a different aspect of human life, human nature. Each of those 7 chakras can have 7 energy levels, from like dead all the way up to fully enlightened. So the purpose of intense sensations or suffering in general, trauma, which is what this series is all about, is forcing you to raise your chakras to a higher energy level just to deal with it. Just the experience itself makes you do it. This is why Saint Teresa of Davila, Saint Teresa d'Avila, would get naked and have her sisters wrap her in studded chains, and then she would roll on the floor in ecstasy. Huh? This happened. It would not surprise me at all if there were many uh, staged crucifixions in various monastic contexts in the Catholic Church. And all of them were probably, homoerotic in some way. It would not surprise me at all, because I discovered this independently when I was a kid, right? That this position, this crucifixion uh, process, is incredibly sexually stimulating. Because all of the meridians, the energy vesicles or energy transmission pathways in the body are that have to do with sex and erotics are uh, highly stimulated by the practice. You know, of course, the problem is that it's terminal, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's a one shot. But um, and that doesn't say you have to use it to punish people or to torture people or to uh, execute people. That's just perverted, weird old human nature that does that. Makes it a tool of control. Again, repression, censorship. Jesus had radical ideas that were too far ahead of his time. He had to go, man. Pontius Pilate is like, I wash my hands of this guy. I'm not responsible. He put it on the Jewish people themselves because they were stuck in the past. But he himself was wise enough, open-minded enough to see that, hey, this what this guy is saying has some potential, possibly.
Sounds similar to the Sundance rituals of the Native Americans.
Yes. And I think they solve a similar purpose, which is to intentionally give a trauma to the body, and then you are forced to deal with it. And in the Sundance, the way you deal with it is also part of the ritual. In other words, you can deal with it in a ritualized, proscribed way, or you can deal with it in an intuitive, spontaneous way. But the result is always the same, which is that your chakras are stimulated into a higher energy state.
By
Now,
intense conditions.
sorry?
By intense conditions.
Yes, intense stimuli. Okay, so in my experience, once you get above level 6, the body has to be restrained to keep from overreacting to the intense stimuli and injuring itself, because we have this whole thing like wired into the body that when there is an intense pain, you contract the muscles and, try to limit the damage. And, like it's a whole biological thing created by evolution or whatever. But what you actually have to do in that situation is relax and accept the stimuli. See, and don't tense up. Don't try to fight against it. Let it have its full impact. In other words, don't resist it. Then the energy can go straight into the chakras and lift you into a higher energy state. This is what's really going on. And this is what people are reaching for in practicing BDSM. But, because they come from usually from the swinger background, their orientation is like gross sex, rubbing bodies together, and the sensations thereof. But even people like that, if you talk with them privately, off camera, right? They will admit, yeah, I've had some really like far out experiences around this stuff. As far as my inner consciousness is concerned, but I can't talk about it to anybody.
Don't we see yogis outwardly in India practicing shibari?
It's I would say, a very primitive form of shibari, but yes, yeah. Oftentimes they will tie themselves in like lotus posture. This is a very common practice uh, because lotus posture is inherently painful. It's difficult to practice enough of it to get the benefit, which is like, I can't tell you, Dave, it's so incredible. This is also a way using intense sensation. I'm not going to call it pain, that's a judgment call, but intense sensation it created deliberately to raise the energy level of the whole body. See? And um, this is why when yogis meditate, they sit in half lotus. But when they train to meditate, they sit in full lotus and they time it crudely, not like we do with digital timers, but with a pocket watch or something. And so they'll sit half an hour or an hour in lotus posture, Padmasana. It's tough, man. Even in half lotus, if I like strap my legs using belts or something, into a half lotus posture, after a half an hour, it really at least gets intense, you know?
So you can forget about the body because the body is already in the position without any mental effort.
Yeah.
And then
You
you
just
can
lean
pull
up
back from
against
the
the
center.
wall or so you lean up against the wall so you don't fall backwards, huh? And you just relax.
Then you can focus on the energy. You can focus on the breath. You don't need to focus on the body. You just let the body go.
Yeah, and the things that happen to the breath are very interesting because in the beginning the breath is coming ragged and fast, you know, in response to the intense sensation. But over time, it's very interesting. The sensation is still there, but somehow it doesn't bother you. It's hard to explain. It's like it's over there someplace,
Yeah.
and you have full cognizance of it and even the full sensation of it if you want to feel it. But something else is happening, which is much more interesting, which is that all the chakras are getting aligned. See, just by the posture, just by the mechanical physics, it's something programmed into the body itself. That when you put the body in that position, it has certain effect on the chakras. And the same with the other yoga asanas. But of course, the Padmasana is the most important one because I believe, combined with practice of celibacy, I mean, I should say chastity, huh? Because you're allowed to have sex, you're just not allowed to ejaculate. That's the actual celibacy, huh? And of course, it was passed down from master to disciple in the old days. So it was totally confidential. It always happened in private. It was never made public because, of course, there would have been, uh, like we have today, it would have encouraged the, how can I say, gross interpretation of sexuality,
Yeah.
which we don't want to do. We want it to have a spiritual context. We want it to be about love, ultimately. So, okay, I think, again, we're running out of time, 10 minutes. So I want to tell in a very brief way the story or the the ideal or the archetype that I meditate on when I'm doing these practices. And it is a story about the lion, of course. Who else, right? The lion that appeared to me first in 1975 when I was in India during intense kirtans. And he was always very friendly, very casual, and very droll. I mean, really a great humorist. He would just crack a couple of jokes, one-liners, and then disappear. But gradually, he and I got close, and we became like uh, deeply entangled in friendship and love. And he manifested a physical form in 2001. And I told you that story, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, how I found the plush lion in the toy store and brought him home.
When you were associating him with Narasimha.
I thought in the beginning, well, I didn't have any other label, any other category.
Yeah.
But it turns out in the end that he's an expansion of Shiva. Because Shiva has, when I got Shiva Darshan, the same exact mood: fearless, loving, completely casual. Like, hey, you want to merge? You know? So this is Lion. And oh, always enthusiastic. Yes, yes, about everything, right? And oh, in fact, last night I had a dream about him. I was with Shakti, and we were going to this like hippie festival, and she was one of the naked dancers at the hippie festival. So when we got to the gate, and it's like, who's this guy? She says, "Oh, he's with me," which meant that I was going to have to be one of the naked dancers, right? At the hippie festival, which is in another planet or something. But anyway, we went inside, and there's Lion. And he like jumped up on me and he's all over me and so friendly. Of course, he's going to show up at something like that, right? But anyway, so my fantasy that I meditate on is that Lion has got me in the lion pleasure caves, the secret lion pleasure caves in the abode of the goddess Kundalini. And we're having this like torrid love affair in this like, well, BDSM dungeon. Uh-huh. And of course, there's nothing to interrupt it because we're in the pure creation where everything is love and everything is beautiful. It's impossible to describe, Dave, but I hope I've done it a little bit of justice. So we have another 5 minutes or so. So what do you think?
I think it's also interesting to add that the lion, from what you told me, is a personification of the life force energy
Vital force.
and prana. And if any of the viewers can see the esoteric connections there, um, it's very beautiful because you're creating a relationship with that energy, which is the cause of everything,
Cause of life too.
the cause of life. Yeah. I would add more, but we don't have the time. But I think that this was very interesting for people to understand exactly how this manifests in your life and how you go about it.
Well, finally, Dave, we have language to talk about it in a balanced and fair, um, non unbiased way. objectively, you know, and not to use any terminology derived from viewing it as a pathology,
Yeah.
but to view it as a part of a process of inner transformation, leading ultimately to enlightenment, you know. And I'll say, yes, the final stage of enlightenment does involve completely letting go of the body, going inside, identifying with the energy in it. But how do you get there? That's the thing. That's the point I want to bring up. And the tried and true, by the book, daily, methodical, routine sadhana does not get you there. Only a super effort. That's what Gurdjieff said. Ordinary efforts don't count. Ordinary practices are just practice. The real thing happens when you are forced somehow or other into a higher energy level by some kind of stressful situation. That's the time to do yoga. That's the time to meditate, because you have the emotional basis for a super experience.
Mic drop.
I think we got it, Dave. Thank you very
We did.
much.
Namaste, Bhagavan.
Namaste. Oh,